So what we are looking at here is an EU West Master Tier Yasuo OTP. Now this is one of my clients, Marvin. Now in this game he was versing a very competent Nico. Now what I'm going to attempt to do is deconstruct each of the individual elements of this lane phase and I guess give you guys a bit of an insight as to how Marvin might be thinking throughout this lane or some of the skills that are at play here. So the obvious one is there's an element of trading, right? How do we use E into the Nico matchup? How do we, constantly proc our fleet and get that flow stacks up to get a little bit of sustain and use that movement speed to avoid skill shots? There is an element of just straight up avoiding skill shots in general. There is an element of thinking about what we want to do with the wave. Can we get the wave in? Should we get the wave in? There is obviously last hitting, right? Getting those last hits. Stacking up our Q3. Do we want to go for EQ or do we want to go for just the E and then wait, auto, then Q? Okay, we got the wave in. Great, beautiful. How low are we? Should we use our pod or not? Has the enemy jungler showed on those raptors? Okay, given the enemy jungler hasn't showed on the raptors, what path could they be doing? Am I under threat? Should I contest this wave? Should I let it come out into my side or should I contest the wave again? Is Nico going to get level 3 first or am I going to get level 3 first? How is this Nico using their W? Are they rushing it or are they holding it? Now that Nico's level 3, what does that mean for me? Should I rush my win more instantaneously? Oh, interesting. This Nico didn't rush E. He actually held it on the back end and traded on the back end. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I've taken a lot of damage. Okay, can I get this wave in? Okay, I'm going to try and get this wave in here. All right, I think I should be able to get the wave in. I have enough sustain. I need to avoid some Qs. Great, I avoided that Q. That means the Q's on cooldown. Okay, beautiful. All right, new Volibear's bot side. I should be able to get this wave in. Let's be nice and conservative here. Use the windmill again. Beautiful. Okay, I'm low. I need to recall. Should I recall? Can I stay to Berserkers? No. Okay, is this a good place to recall? All right, I'm going to go for a recall. So this is just a very brief overview of Marvin's early lane here in terms of some of the skills or some of the elements that make up this lane phase. Now, the concept that I want to introduce here to help wrap your head around this and I guess understand League to a much deeper level is that of the mental stack. Now let's set Marvin's mental stack at an arbitrary number of 100. So let's say Marvin has 100 mental points. This represents how much energy, mental energy Marvin has, or how much room, how many things that he can actually process at any given time. Now the reason mental stack is a thing is because we're not a computer. We can't do many tasks at once. Multitasking is incredibly difficult. Right? And so every task that we do takes up a certain portion of this mental stack. Now, let's say in this early lane phase, maybe a 25% of it was potentially taken up by trading, specifically eing onto the Nico and the matchup interactions. Maybe another portion of it was thinking about the wave states and what we should do with the wave. Another portion was probably thinking about how much threat they were under and could they have died to a gank. Another one was probably thinking about when they were going to recall and if they should have reset and how much gold they were on. Maybe another element of it was thinking about what were the patterns of this player individually. How is this Nico using their abilities and how should I alter the way I move and use my abilities? This is just, again, a very rough insight into what might be going on inside Marvin's head at any given time. Now, ultimately, this is a generalization because in reality, what it's going to look like at every second, at every millisecond, the ratio of the way our mind is comprehending these things or shifting its degrees in terms of emphasis and focus, it's always going to change. It might be 25% thinking about trading at one moment, and then it might be 50%, and then it might be 75%, and then it's always going to be shifting around. But nonetheless, we only have a set amount of mental bandwidth at any given time. We can only do so much because we are human. Now, the better we get at the game, what does that actually mean? That means that we can actually develop more and more habits such that the amount of mental energy that any given skill takes is a lot less, right? So we become a lot more efficient. It may only take, in order to take good quality trades into this matchup, when he first played the matchup back in the day, maybe 3 seasons ago, maybe it would have taken 75% of his mental capacity, such that his mental stack would be completely overwhelmed, and as a result, he may be less intentional about wave states, probably die to more ganks, and be less aware of what's happening around the map. And that's pretty fair to say that's what most people struggle with. But as he got better and better and he got more competent with the trades, he doesn't have to allocate as much mental budget or mental bandwidth towards trading, such that with that freed up mental capacity, he can think about many other things. He can be more intentional about his waves. He can think about the junglers. He can probably avoid jungle ganks. He can think about his wards. He can plan out his resets. He can think about how to even be more creative with his trading patterns and his movement. This is all a byproduct of freeing up that mental stack through the overarching development of habits due to repetitions and champion mastery. And this happens, this is prevalent in every aspect of your gameplay. So at a very high level, this is kind of the way the mind works during a game of League. Now, it's important to note as we go through this lane, Marvin has had a decent amount of experience with the Nico matchup. Now, this Nico was very, very good and was definitely overwhelming Marvin's mental stack, but at least he had some element or some degree of matchup understanding and clarity over what he should have been doing with the waves and how he should be interpreting this matchup. Now, the less familiar you are with the matchup, the more mental bandwidth you're going to have to allocate towards trading and just the raw interactions between your champions, such that you're going to be a lot more overwhelmed by things outside of your lane. And so a lot of people, when they verse a matchup for the first time, they get very overwhelmed and they make a bunch of mistakes and they're probably more inclined to die to ganks because, again, this is all stemming back to having an overwhelmed mental stack. Let's go into another quick example. Now, in this example here, I'm playing Lissandra into Silas. Now, the reason I wanted to show this little example very quickly is that it's the exact opposite of the VOD we saw before. Marvin's mental stack was completely overwhelmed. And this was because of multiple things. We had junglers and supports coming through the lane, which you didn't see, but it happened later. It was inherently a very heavy trading matchup, the Nico into Yasuo. And Yasuo as a champion is a very mentally overwhelming champion due to the trading patterns, having to constantly trade, go in, go out, go in, go out, have shoving wave states. Whereas in this example, I'm chilling. I know exactly what I want to do with the wave. I know I don't want to contest Silas early. I know I want the wave on my side. There's a lot less heavy trading, such that my mental stack is a lot more freed up. I don't have to allocate, I don't have all this mental bandwidth occupied by all this crazy heavy trading and avoiding skill shots and someone getting up in my face. So inherently, the more heavy trading and chaotic a matchup is, the more mental bandwidth is required to take good quality trades, therefore doing all of the other things such as all the fundamentals like, resets and wave management and jungle tracking and awareness of where the supports are and all that stuff becomes inherently harder. In this game, I can chill. I could have a conversation with someone. I could be doing anything here. I have complete clarity over my jungler's location. I probably know what's going on bot. And as this game fast forwards, every little moment here, I know where my support is. I know what the likelihood of the enemy support is coming here, if they're coming here. I know where the jungler was pathing. I know where my jungler was. I know exactly what I need to do with the wave, and if I can do that with the wave. So from a mental stack perspective, I'm very freed up to think about whatever I want, really. I'm not really that overwhelmed. And this is why certain people gravitate towards simpler champions that have a lot less chaotic lane phases, because again, that mental bandwidth is going to be a lot less overwhelmed. One interesting little concept that has become more apparent to me over time is when a high level player goes into a low level bracket, or let's say there's a high level player smurfing, all right? The game feels very easy, not because of the lack of mechanics from the enemy or the lack of game knowledge, although those may be factors. A big part of it is that the laners aren't overly aggressive. So if a person is smurfing in a lower elo bracket, they have such a freed up mental stack to think about anything they want. Now, in this example here, we had, I believe this was a Platinum 3 ASO client of mine, and he played this lane very, very defensively. He basically wasn't interacting with this Lissandra. Now, as a result, this Lissandra could think about anything. This Lissandra was going to be 10 times more aware of where the enemy jungle was going to be. This Lissandra could afford to allocate that mental stack budget towards what their jungler was doing. They could be planning unique invades. They could get good quality ward locations out. All of the fundamentals of the Lissandra are inherently going to be better because their mental stack isn't overwhelmed. And so during this session, a big part of the takeaway from this early lane was I said, well, look, every single time Lissandra is using Q on the wave, you're not doing anything. You're not getting in her face. You're not overwhelming her mental stack at all. So from a mental stack perspective, the way I view it, let's say we have two different realities. In one reality, we're not trading at all. The trading aspect of Lissandra's mental stack is like 5%, or maybe even less. Let's just give it an arbitrary number of 5%. It's tiny right? This is a tiny portion of the mental stack budget. If we were just to walk up and start posturing more aggressively, maybe go for some Q taps, make her sweat when her cooldowns, when her Q was on cooldown and things like that. Well, what the mental stack may look like is that you might actually force the Lysandra to allocate 20% or 25% of that mental stack energy towards trading, movement, and maybe even spend a little bit more of that mental stack budget towards last hitting because you're putting more pressure on their last hits. As a result, there is less space here for Lysandra to think about other things. They might miss a warding window. They may not be aware of their jungler invading. They may not be aware of when they should reset. They may be more inclined to overstay in the lane with no mana. They may mess up a wave state. They're bound to make other mistakes. So at the highest levels of League of Legends, guys, I was use this as a bit of a case study. What happens is that everyone knows what to do. Let's say you get Chovy versus Showmaker. Everyone knows what to do. Chovy knows how the matchup plays out. Showmaker knows how the matchup plays out. They both know where they should be directing their attention. What makes League difficult is not what they need to do. It's the execution of that when you have another player in the lane purposefully overwhelming your mental stack and getting in your face and trying to make you uncomfortable. So in this game, because Odin here wasn't overwhelming at all Lysandra's mental stack, as we fast forward, Lysandra had perfect awareness of what her jungler was doing, could easily follow up on her Talia moving into the jungle, beautifully collapsed, and they killed the Amumu in the jungle. Now, you may say, well, what did we have to do with that? There's not much I could have done about that. Well, maybe. But you definitely could have made Lysandra sweat a little bit more. You definitely could have overwhelmed her mental stack a little bit more. Even though you can't bully her out of lane, you could have put more pressure on her such that maybe she was late to that play. Maybe she wouldn't even have known that Talia was moving into that play. And as we fast forward later on, this exact same thing happens again. Lysandra moves into bot side. Now, not to say she couldn't be aware of this, but again, it would be a lot harder, or there'd be a higher chance of her missing this roam play onto the bot side with her jungler from a perspective of mental bandwidth. So this is like a part of the game that not many people think. People think trading, right? Or the purpose of trading is purely to get damage down and to take some of the HP. Well, yes, that's a part of it and a pretty big part of it, but I believe 40% of it is actually from a mental bandwidth perspective. I want to trade not because I'm going to kill them or take their HP, but also I just want to put pressure on them. It's going to be harder for them to CS. It's going to be harder for them to do all of those other things that I mentioned before. In the League community, there seems to be this inherent disrespect or lack of awareness is a better way to frame it, for the idea or the concept of mental bandwidth or the mental stack. But this isn't necessarily apparent in other games. I want to talk about StarCraft for a second. I had this interesting conversation with a master tier equivalent player in StarCraft who said, within the StarCraft community, this concept is very well respected and very well understood. And this is inherently due to the way the game plays out. It's painfully obvious that elite level players and very high level players, and if you're going to get any good at the game, you need to have a developed mental stack because there's so many tasks at the same time that you need to do. You need to be moving some units on one side of the map while gathering resources and building troops and expanding your base over here. There are so many things that you have to do to win the game. It's painfully obvious, and this is also manifests in a way where you can see their APM very clearly. They're panning their camera to multiple areas. They've got all these crazy keybinds. It's like the equivalent of controlling multiple League of Legends characters, right? So the StarCraft community understands this and they respect this. In League of Legends, it's not really well respected or well understood because when the average player watches, let's say Faker, sure, they might see some flickers of camera panning, but there is an underappreciation of how much information is being gathered and how much muscle memory is actually embedded in Faker's gameplay. For example, Faker would be considering simultaneously what he needs to do with trades and take competent trades with beautiful spacing and last hitting, farming 10 CS per minute in a very mentally overwhelming matchup against an opponent that's putting an immense amount of pressure, while also being aware of when he needs to recall, what he needs to do with the wave, where his junglers are pathing, where the enemy jungler is, how much threat the enemy support has onto him. And they called Faker, the god of, soaking up pressure. That's what made him such an incredibly good player. Like, everyone would try to gank him, but it would be super hard to kill. Faker is, these high-level players, not just Faker, their mental stack is so sophisticated. The amount of information that they can gather and the amount of habits that they've created is mind-boggling. Now, I want to go a little bit further here. One of the things that I've noticed is that inside the league community, we tend to put all these fancy outplays on a pedestal. This is why channels like Synapse are so big, right? You got these fancy pentakills or whatever the hell it might be. This stuff to me over time, as I've learned more about the game, have never really, just don't really scratch that itch anymore. I just don't really find them that impressive. I don't really find that to be the interesting part of the game. What I've really learned over time is that what really is difficult in League of Legends is the consistency of the fundamentals and the consistency via execution. Now, a great example of this is Chovy. Even when I'm talking about this, I get goosebumps. If I think about Chovy, he's able to farm 11 CS per minute on a champion like Zoe, or Showmaker, farming 11 CS per minute on a champ like Zoe, while dealing with a high threat mid jungle 2v2 like a LeBlanc Rek'Sai, or maybe against a Shaco jungle and a Bard support, while also kind of just, from an appearance perspective, engaging with the chat, maybe talking to teammates, communicating with teammates, and thinking strategically about the game. This is mind-boggling to me. Like, this is absolutely mind-boggling. For anyone that has played against high-level laners in League of Legends, it is so mentally overwhelming. Dodging skill shots, thinking about your wave, because the one moment you mess up a wave state, you're dead. The jungler will kill you. The one time you overstay in lane, you're dead. The support will roam and kill you. You mess up one wave state, you're going to go down 2 waves of farm, and maybe you don't have TP, you're screwed. Chovy, these players like Chovy, it almost looks like they're robotic. Their mental stack is so developed. The amount of information that they are able to process and execute upon is unbelievable. It doesn't even look like it's human. It's scary. And that is the hard part about League of Legends. It's not about each skill individually is not that difficult. It's the consistent execution of each of them while gathering all of this information and having absolute intention with all of these aspects of the game that make it so goddamn impressive. That is the hardest part of League of Legends. It's how overwhelmed your mental stack is and having to develop all of these habits and all of this muscle memory. That is really what I find truly impressive. But the people that are good at the game, right, the people that make all the content, they're not really incentivized to talk about this stuff because ultimately that's not really going to get clicks. And so as a result, the same kind of belief system inside the league community is just perpetuates, right? Because no one really wants to make videos on the mental stack or all this stuff because it's just not really sexy. It's kind of like the equivalent of a scientific paper versus a TMZ article. It's not really something that people are really incentivized to even talk about. Now, developing your mental stack is probably one of the most bang for buck value skills inside League of Legends. And the reason for this is that because League at its base level is made up of 3 parts: information gathering, information processing, and execution. Any problem, anything that happens inside of a game of League can be boiled down to this 3-step process. An example, let's say we're coming out of base and we need to decide where to go on the map. Right, so we look at a minimap and we say, okay, where is everyone? We see all the portraits. We look at maybe what the next neutral objective is, and then once we've gathered all this information, we got to process it. Well, what does that mean, right? Like, how do I make sense of this information? So then I process and I make a decision and then I execute. Now, if you have a very well-developed mental stack and you have the mental bandwidth to actually go through these few steps, everything becomes easier. Gathering information is easier. You'll be more effective, more efficient. Processing information, you'll be faster, cleaner. That will be easier. Executing upon whatever decision you make will be easier. Every step of the journey becomes easier as your mental stack becomes more sophisticated. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper here and talk about pattern recognition. Now, League at its core is a game of pattern recognition. And the reason for this is because the game is fundamentally impossible. This is what people don't understand. League is an impossible game. And the reason I say that is because there are so many things to actually consider at any given time. It's not possible for the human brain to actually comprehend every single variable. Therefore, we rely heavily on pattern recognition and heuristics to make good quality decisions. Now, chess is actually quite similar. The majority of situations you're going to be in within a game of chess are actually kind of solved positions. This means that every point up until a particular point, or every play, every decision up until a particular point in a game has typically happened in the past before. And an obvious example of this are openings in chess, right? In chess, there are these things called openings, where it's like a set of 20 or so moves that you essentially rote learn. And you also rote learn the enemy's responses and all the permutations there as well from the opposition, such that it's just they do that, I do this, I do this, they do that. It's kind of like this repetitive kind of thing based off pattern recognition, but based off past experiences that you've had and problems or puzzles that you've solved in the past. Now, that's not throughout the entirety of the game of chess. That's up until a point. Then the game gets to a point where it's like, oh, okay, I don't know. I've never been in this situation before. Now I got to problem solve my way out of it. Now, this is what people need to respect for the game of League of Legends. A huge part of it is, again, pattern recognition. I know that if I have a Braum support and my jungler's pathing this way and I got these sorts of champions in the games, I kind of roughly know what can happen and won't happen. I'm not completely bamboozled when a scenario happens, because everything is just another one of those. I've seen this scenario before. I can draw back upon my past experiences to come up with a good baseline decision. And so I would argue that this is probably even more prevalent in League than it is in chess, because the game is so fast paced. Things are happening so quickly. There's 5 players on each team making decisions dynamically, and the game is changing and morphing, and that, people are getting killed, and then the next objective is spawning, and the next minion wave. So many things are happening, so you can't possibly sit there and pause the game and start scratching your head thinking, what do I do here? The only time that happens is when you're dead. But even then, the game itself in front of your face is morphing and changing literally in real time. So for the sake of your mental bandwidth, this is why we need to rely somewhat on pattern recognition. Now, it's important to note, you can actually develop better quality pattern recognition and solve these puzzles, not only through your own gameplay and your own experiences, but from watching intently other people's gameplay. So if you're watching Chovy's gameplay or whatever intently, and you're really trying to pay attention to how he's coming to those decisions and why he made those decisions, your underlying pattern recognition will also improve. So this is why watching high-level content and other high-level players can actually be extremely valuable for your own gameplay. Now, we can actually use this concept offensively. Once you really understand it, you can actually purposely overwhelm the enemy's or the opposition's mental stack by doing things that are kind of unorthodox. So essentially what you can do is you can put them in territory that they haven't been in before and making them solve problems that they typically haven't seen before. This is why Smurfing is so, or Smurfs in general, are so incredibly overwhelming to verse, because they're going to put you in territory or situations that you haven't experienced before. You take the average, say, silver player that has to deal with a diamond Smurf, that diamond player is going to be posturing in ways and taking trades in ways that you've never seen before. So instantaneously, your mental stack is going to be completely overwhelmed, because you can't rely on all these patterns you can't rely on pattern recognition, because there is no pattern here. You can't rely on previously solved puzzles because you haven't seen this puzzle before either. So instantaneously, you're on the defense and you're having to react to whatever it is the enemy is doing. This ties into a quote that I saw, which is, the best swordsman in the world doesn't need to fear the second best swordsman. He should fear the man that has never picked up a sword, which I thought was kind of relevant here. And this is also why off-meta picks are so goddamn effective in solo queue especially. The first time you see something, and you say you have no idea what it does, you don't know what the identity is of it, you don't know what its game plan is, you're inherently reacting, and reacting costs more mental bandwidth than anticipation. And how many times have you gone into a game and you just got killed at level 2 or 3? You're like, oh, I didn't know that champ could do that, right? I remember vividly when I versed Pike mid for the first time, and the Pike mid started E, and I think it just with Halo Blades and just like slap my head in or stab my head in, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And, next time I verse it, I'm a little bit more familiar, so I'm a little bit less overwhelmed. So, this is why a lot of people also love playing off meta picks, because they know that if they're versing an opponent that doesn't know what their champion does, the enemy's mental stack are going to be completely overwhelmed from the get-go. Now, how many times have you guys heard maybe one of your friends or even yourself say something along the lines of, I feel like I'm a much better competitive player than I am a solo queue player. I feel like I perform so much better in Clash than I do in solo queue. Or I feel like I play so much better in a team than I do in solo queue. Right? If I had $1 for every time I heard that, I'd be a very rich man. Now, the reason people say this is because these players don't necessarily struggle with the theory aspect of the game. They struggle with the mental bandwidth aspect of the game. And so when you're entering, say, Clash or a competitive environment, the games are typically a lot more structured. They're a little bit slower. They're less chaotic. And most importantly, everyone is helping you by giving you information. Your support is tracking the enemy support. The jungler is telling you the enemy jungler's path. The top laner is saying when their top lane is moving. Someone is telling you when the next objective is coming up. Someone is probably telling you what they need from you. So your mental stack is a lot less strained because other people are aiding you by giving you information. They're helping you with the gathering of information and even processing of information. So this is also why the players that typically excel in solo queue have a much more developed or well-developed mental stack. They also tend to make better quality competitive players, not all the time, but a lot of the time, because they have now so much freed up mental stack that they can think very creatively and strategically about the game. And then they can go above and beyond in these competitive matches. Now, there's an interesting side effect of, I guess, wrapping your head around this whole concept of mental bandwidth and the mental stack. And that is typically people become kinder and more empathic, not only towards others, but to yourself. And the reason for this is because once you understand what makes League truly difficult, and that is the mental stack and how overwhelming it can be, and the amount of there's only a certain amount of information that we can hold in our brain, and et cetera, and the over reliance of pattern recognition and habits, you start to respect what the game really is, and you start to understand why people make quote unquote basic mistakes. Any mistake that looks basic may not necessarily be basic because of the factors at play based on what was going on in their mental stack. A common thing you hear a lot of the time from the average solo queue player is, why didn't they just do that? Why didn't they just ward? How could they die to that gank? The junglers showed on the minimap. How did you not see that? Oh, my laners are so dumb, or whatever the hell it is, right? Well, okay, let's deconstruct that. I'll give you a specific example from my own gameplay. There was a moment in one of my solo queue games whereby I had a beautiful ward and I was leaning and everything. And as the jungler was moving over the ward, I was in the middle of a trade, literally going for like, I think, a Syndra QE. And so I went for my Syndra QE, I backed off, I looked at the minimap and no one was there. But what I had missed is that the jungler literally passed over the ward as I was undergoing a trade. So from a mental bandwidth perspective, I can't simultaneously take that trade and be aware of the jungler showing on that ward. There was like a second, 1 or 2 seconds, 1.5 seconds, where the jungler literally just got lucky by walking over the ward at that exact time. If the jungler had come a little bit earlier or a little bit later, I would have seen him. Now the jungler might flame me saying, "You're an idiot. How could that jungler get that gank off?" That's just, it is what it is. So if you're the jungler, having a little bit more respect for mental bandwidth, and especially when you're playing chaotic matchups and there's a lot of heavy trading going on, mistakes that may look basic on the surface may not really be that basic. I mean, you can at least, yes, maybe objectively they are basic, but again, the basics of League of Legends, just because they're basic in theory, doesn't mean they're actually easy to do, right? It's the execution of League that is difficult, and not the theory. And this is the tough pill to swallow. I've been sent videos from people, like there was like an ex-Warcraft guy. I got sent this video and people saying, Curtis, what do you think? This guy said League of Legends is really easy. And look, everyone has their own different opinions. But what I think people massively underestimate about League and why they struggle to get success in it is because they think that League is a very simple strategic game. And it is. I would tend to agree. I don't think the strategy of League is overly complicated, although there are many iterations and it's infinite. You can be infinitely creative, but I don't think that's what makes League difficult. It's the execution. And people don't respect the execution of the game. People think it's just because it's something as simple as warding and leaning, they take it at face value. They don't really factor in how hard it is to do that while doing everything else, because there's so many things you need to do simultaneously. That is what makes League of Legends hard. And to this day, when I'm reviewing my own mistakes, I always factor in, how overwhelmed was my mental stack at this particular moment or during this particular sequence? And why was my mental stack overwhelmed? Where was I directing my attention? And then I can really get into the conversation of, okay, well, if I was directing my attention here, my mental bandwidth was occupied with this. Why was I doing that? Was that even the correct way to utilize my mental bandwidth? Could I have maybe focused on something else? And why was I using my mental bandwidth like that? You can go extra layers deeper. And lastly, let's talk a little bit about improving your mental bandwidth. So number one, really not only understanding what happens, but why it happens the way it does. The more deeply you understand particular scenarios, the more you're actually developing anticipation, and you're relying less on reaction. And from a I guess a mental bandwidth perspective, anticipation costs a lot less than reaction. So when you're breaking down your plays, don't just look at it at face value and say, what happened? Why did it happen? Why did the enemy do that? Why did this whole scenario play out the way it did? Developing champ mastery. The more champ mastery you have, the more freed up your mental stack is. This is because you don't have to allocate as much mental energy towards, things like, can I kill here? Should I go in? Does this make sense for my champion? When should I base? All of these things should just be, second nature based off developing champion mastery. Number 3, looking at scenarios from the enemy's perspective. Again, this kind of ties into the first point. The more you understand the game through other people's lenses, the more you're able to leverage anticipation rather than a reaction. And so, some typical questions that I like to ask myself is, okay, if I were them, why would I do that? If I was that champion, what would make me want to go for this play? Or why would I use my abilities that way? Again, you want to get ultra clear as to why these scenarios play out the way they do. Mental stack priming. Now, mental stack priming is a little bit complicated, but at a very simple level, if I was able to summarize it, if you kind of already know what's likely going to happen in a scenario, you can prime your mental stack to already think about particular things. So let's say I'm heading to a team fight as a mobile mage. If I can prime my mental stack with, okay, I know that I got to factor in there's going to be a TFR coming here any second. I know that a Leona R is going to try and arm me, blah, 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 blah. If I know what abilities to already factor in, I already know where to roughly direct my attention. I can already kind of correctly anticipate or manage my mental stack budget, my mental stack or my mental bandwidth accordingly to perfectly match the scenario that I'm going to be within, such that I don't need to worry about, where should I direct my attention? I already know where to direct my attention. So it just makes it a lot easier on your mental bandwidth because you don't have to change around or react to things. Again, it's tying into the whole theme of anticipation. And then lastly, repetitions. The more repetitions you get in League, the more muscle memory you'll develop and everything will become easier and in more habits, etc., etc. That's kind of obvious, but a very important one. So hopefully this all helps. If you have any questions, I'll see you guys around the comments. Otherwise, see you soon for another video. Cheers.